What's up, y'all? Heard word of the day right now is reparations. What's my thoughts? Here's my thoughts on it. I hear people say that it happened 400 years ago. You weren't a slave. So why should you benefit from something that happened 400 years ago? Well, I've heard raza that a lot of people who are probably against reparations listen to. I don't really, but they have made a good point here and there. One was that the conquest of Mexico by Europeans created this mestizo who was looked down upon by the indigenous folks and by the European folks. And that looking down upon them created a sense of having to be more that led to, in a lot of ways, machismo. A lot of the pride we have, the inability to cry, the inability to show emotions, to have to be this stoic person, from what I've heard from, raza folks who read about it and whatnot, that it still affects us. And that a lot of the stuff in our culture that isn't necessarily good, it's good to be a man, maybe not a machista though, right? I don't think it would be. And that's part of that conquest. So we're still affected centuries later. I believe that today's African community is still affected by stuff that was done to slaves and passed down. But here's the thing. The last injustice against black folks wasn't 400 years ago. It wasn't 100 years ago with Jim Crow. It wasn't 50 years ago with redlining and housing covenants that were intended to keep them in polluted neighborhoods, in industrial areas, away from where people's wealth and was protected so that they could pass it on to their kids. A lot of laws denied black people those opportunities, and they weren't 400 years ago. They were 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 30 years ago. A lot of those laws were also hurtful to us and didn't let us build generational wealth. If you were Filipino, you couldn't even own property at one point. If you were Asian, you couldn't own a house. You couldn't buy a house that you build up and pass on to your kids so that their kids could not be starting from scratch each time. I'd argue that one of us on here listening to this, one person hearing this probably had their city council or board of supervisors sell out their neighborhood to protect a wealthy neighborhood. And in protecting that wealthy neighborhood, they're protecting that neighborhood's wealth that they can pass on to their children. In putting polluting sources and citing every homeless shelter in our neighborhoods, black, brown, Asian, Polynesian, poor white communities, folks, we're not allowed to build that wealth because our house isn't appreciating like those other ones that they protected. Our kids might have to work through college because of the stuff that's put around the house their parents built that devalued it. Whereas those kids whose wealth was protected, they don't have to work through college. Maybe they can afford to do an internship at a really nice place where everybody knows them, and then when it's time to interview, they got the job. Even if this person of color, black, brown, Asian, Polynesian, busted their butt twice as hard because they don't know them. They had to go work. They couldn't take advantage of an internship because the system didn't allow their parents to build wealth. Now, I do believe that, I don't have a victim mentality. I made it. I did pretty good for myself, more than what anyone believed, I think, and probably a lot less than what a few people believed. But when I speak up, I'm not speaking up that it's me being victimized. I'm speaking up for communities of color in general being victimized in land use decisions and by the government in the politics that they employ. And this happened last week, the week before, to the disbenefit of black and brown folks. I have managed millions of dollars in grants. I know who got the grants. And it wasn't black folks at the top of the list. In fact, they were probably near the bottom. So I don't know if that applies to every sector, but at least in these few sectors that I was familiar with, black folks were at the bottom of the grant funding and the government funding. And that's another thing. You know, when folks talk about their taxes and not wanting to pay taxes and looking at it as a taxpayer, there is so much government bloat. At this moment, billions of dollars are going out from the government to disadvantaged and marginalized communities. And the government acknowledges that they're directing them to these communities specifically because they've wronged them. They've put them and made decisions that disfavored them, that made them sicker than those other wealthier communities. And it wasn't that long ago. Maybe last week, like I said. So when people talk about reparations, it's not for something that happened 400 years ago. It's for something that happened last week and will probably happen again next week, if you really think about it. You know, when I go to Hawaii, it, in some ways, you know, I love the paradise there. But in other ways, I do look at some of the cleaning staff at the hotel, and sometimes I see the hurt. You know, these people, it was their island, and now they're maids on their island. Now I haven't been in a while because that's kind of hard to deal with, but we've done a lot to a lot of people. And out of those billions of dollars that I said go out, you know how much gets eaten by middlemen, by contractors, by consultants, by nonprofit executive directors that make $200 an hour. Some do make a difference in their community, and you know, those I hope to highlight on this page. You know, I've already celebrated some. LaDonna, Sandra, you know, just champs for their community. But not everyone is. Some people are making a nice living using black folks and Mexican folks and Asian folks and Polynesian folks, claiming they speak for them. Yet they can't bring them to a public process with the government to speak for themselves. So if you're really concerned about your tax dollars, then you need to call out the government bloat and waste, because they're already spending money to correct the wrongs they made. But the people who are supposed to benefit from it don't get it. You know, they don't know how to write grants. They don't speak that government language. They don't know the jargon. The people that do ain't connected to the community most of the time. Some are, though. And so what do I think about reparations? Fuck the middleman. Give it to the people, man, and start with the black folks, because they've been the ones fighting for that the longest. You know, you hear Mexican folks, and I've heard them, well, the Ukrainians came over and got to the front of the line with immigration. Well, black folks been fighting for those reparations. I haven't seen us fighting for them to the degree they have, even close. So where would we get off jumping in front of the line because, you know, we lost Mexico? And maybe we do deserve them for that. I don't know. I really don't know if I need to understand more what Santana did in selling it and all that. To be honest, I don't know, but um, I do think everybody that's been wrong should be helped to the starting line, so that when you do start, you're starting from the same place. You know, I hear Raza, well, we work hard and you know, we don't need those we don't need reparations. They don't need them either. You know, they have that conservative pull yourself up by your chin straps mentality, where it's your fault. You're lazy if you didn't make it. There's something wrong with you if you didn't make it, because anyone can make it here. A lot of the people I see hearing that ain't 1/3 as wealthy as people I know who are not as talented as them, who maybe ain't as smart as them, and they didn't have to be, because they started ahead of the starting line. When they were born, they already owned a house that their parents were going to leave them, because the laws and the government allowed their parents to build wealth. And those same laws and government didn't allow other people to build that wealth and pass it along. You know, recently in LA, there was that story of the descendants of a black family being given back that beachfront property because the parents, their ancestors were pushed out. It was taken from them. They didn't want black folks there. There used to be a lot of black farmers, believe it or not. I mean, when people say urban, they think black, but you know, black folks have a strong in history of farming. There's a town in the Central Valley that is a town of black farmers, and they're proud of it, and they have a history of it, and there is a history of all that being taken from them to help other people. So it's not that they were lazy, it's that the government kept putting obstacles to them getting ahead long after slavery passed. So that's my 2 cents on it. I say give it to them, because you know, they're still giving the money away and it ain't reaching them or us. You know, it's going to middlemen in our name, in their name. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I know it's a long video, but that's what I think.